The Green Man. The Green Man was long said to live and hide in an abandoned Pennsylvania railroad tunnel known as Piney Fork. He would supposedly appear if you called out to him, and witnesses swore he was glowing green from an old electrical accident. Presented as a creepy monster who would shock his victims, few could have imagined that the Green Man urban legend was true. The story of the ghostly figure, sometimes known as Charlie No-Face, actually came from Hillsville, Pennsylvania. Raymond Robinson was left badly scarred by a near-death electrocution in real life. 2 years after his father had passed away, when he was only 9 years old, some friends dared him to climb up a girder, which carried overhead wires, to grab a bird's nest. He reached it, but touched a wire with 22,000 volts of electricity running through it. He fell, his body and face suffering from severe burns. He survived despite what the doctors expected, albeit with an amputated arm at the elbow and a severely damaged face. His nose and eyes were gone, and his mouth was deformed. Despite being a sociable person, Robinson became a recluse and sustained himself by making floor mats, belts, and wallets. As he became disenchanted with staying at home extensively, he began to take day walks. Alarming neighbors, some even confronting him and asking Robinson to stay away from their children, he became even more isolated. In response, he began taking night walks on State Route 351, with one foot on the gravel and the other on the pavement, using a walking stick to navigate despite his blindness. He was reportedly spotted on these night walks, and those who approached him were surprised to meet a kind-spirited, friendly man. It became a popular activity, especially among curious teenagers, to go to Route 351 at night to try to encounter Robinson. In the 1960s, the attention directed at him peaked, causing traffic jams as people crowded Route 351 to get a peek at him. It's been suggested that the part of the urban legend about green skin was actually inspired by his attire, as he often wore his favorite green shirt on these nightly excursions. In the 80s, he moved to a nursing home in Pennsylvania, where he lived out his last days, but the urban legend born from his accident lives on. The Bunny Man. According to legend, the Bunny Man escaped from a shuttered Virginia insane asylum after a bus transferring him crashed, and he was soon on the loose in the countryside, leaving skinned and half-eaten rabbits hanging from trees and overpasses. The man had been convicted of murdering his family on Easter, and it said he moved from preying on rabbits to stalking humans. While fleeing a police search, the deranged man was allegedly hit by a train near Clifton, Virginia, at the Colchester Overpass, leaving behind a ghost that haunts the area. While no Bunny Man records exist, there are instead true reports of an unidentified Axe Man who attacked cars wearing a bunny suit. Thanks to a research investigation on the subject by the Fairfax County Public Library historian Brian Conley, it's now known that 2 main incidents were recorded by the police related to the Bunny Man legend. The first event took place on October 19, 1970, when a couple visiting relatives on Guinea Road in Burke reported that they had parked on a field across the street. They returned to get their vehicle, and as they sat in their car, a man dressed in white smashed their passenger window and screamed about trespassing as they drove away. One of them claimed the man wore a white suit with bunny ears, while the other affirmed he wore a white pointed hat. Either way, rumors spread based on the incident. The second event took place 10 days later. On October 29th, a security guard at a construction site approached a man in a bunny costume who was standing on the porch of a house under construction. Reportedly, the guard did not notice until he was close to the man that the Bunny Man had an axe. The Bunny Man told him, quote, "If you come any closer, I'll chop off your head," as he chopped a post with his axe. Inconclusive investigations were launched after both events, and a type of mass hysteria erupted, with over 50 people reporting sightings of the Bunny Man in the following weeks, and an article from the Washington Post claiming that the Bunny Man had eaten a cat. The stories following these reports traveled, evolved, and turned into the urban legend known today, along with a number of variations. Staten Island's Cropsy. Staten Island's Cropsy allegedly prowled playgrounds in the dark and snatched children with his hooked hand. The boys and girls would allegedly be dragged to the ruins of the Seaview Sanatorium, where they would be tortured by the maniac. First told by parents to frighten bad children, The legend took a sinister turn with the discovery of a real body found buried near the Willowbrook School for Mentally Challenged Children. The crime was linked to former employee Andre Rand, who worked as an orderly, custodian, and physical therapist. Rand reportedly had a difficult childhood, with his father passing away when he was only 14, and his mother being institutionalized at a psychiatric facility in Brentwood. Rand had been living in the woods around the institutions and was linked to the disappearances of at least 4 local children. In 1988, he was charged and convicted with first-degree kidnapping with a 25-year sentence. In 2008, he would have been eligible for parole, but was convicted for a second kidnapping committed 23 years earlier. Since New York state law has no statute of limitations for this crime, he was convicted in 2004 to an additional 25 years of prison. The legend of the Staten Island Cropsy expanded and circulated while Rand stayed behind bars. He'll be eligible for parole in 2037 at the age of 93. The Collector. Appearing in stories to explain creepy homes and neighbors, the Corpse Collector is said to keep human specimens in his basement, sometimes dug up from local graves, and sometimes collected from locals gone missing. Variations and local additions are common with the myth of the Collector. A number of real-life horrors closely match these urban legends, most prominently the story of Harrison Graham, a real-life cookie monster. From 1986 to 1987, Graham would reportedly entertain children with his blue puppet during the day. At night, he would attack local women. He was discovered due to the smell emanating from his quarters, which he tried claiming came from before he occupied the apartment. When that didn't work, he claimed to suffer from dissociative identity disorder. At his bench trial, 2 women testified against him. After the judge denied the psychosis defense, he finally confessed and was convicted on 7 counts for his crimes. The death penalty sentence was overturned due to an appeal for consideration of his mental illness and low intellect. Also linked to the urban legend of the Corpse Collector is Anatoly Moskvin, who stole at least 26 bodies from a cemetery to dress up as life-size, faceless human dolls. He was arrested in 2011, and the 26 dolls were found in his flat and garage and within his parents' home. He is suspected to have desecrated up to 150 graves, headstones, and nameplates. Maps and doll-making instructions were also found at his place of residence. His parents claimed not to know about his criminal activities, thinking he had simply been making kid-sized dolls. Moskvin claimed that he was able to spiritually communicate with the deceased children, and that he compassionately sought occultist and scientific methods to bring them back to life. He would exhume the dead, dry them near the graveyard, and then take them to his garage where he would make dolls, trying to create bodies the children could use if they ever came back to life. He was generally unable to prevent decay, so he would wrap their limbs in cloth, stuff the body with rags to provide padding, and on occasion added a wax mask to the face. The human dolls were then dressed in children's clothes. Since they did look like homemade toys, he went undetected for years. Before his crimes were discovered, Moskvin was well known and respected in Russian academic circles as an expert in Celtic history and folklore, as well as linguistics. Peers described him as an eccentric genius. In an interview written before the arrest, he expressed that his interest in the occult came from a childhood experience that marked him, during which he was forced to kiss the forehead of an 11-year-old girl at her funeral procession. Moskvin was subsequently released from criminal liability due to illness. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, he's been held at a hospital ever since his trial began. The Dog Boy of Arkansas. Long believed to only be a legend, the Dog Boy of Arkansas was actually inspired by Gerald Floyd Bettis, who was obsessed with experimenting on the dogs he kidnapped and hoarded in a special extension to his home during the 1970s. Perhaps bored of his small prey, Bettis's fascination with violence eventually manifested itself in the imprisonment of his parents. Locals reported he was enormous in comparison to his parents, weighing 300 pounds and being 6'4". The elderly couple was kept locked in Bettis's attic, where they were fed like dogs. His father passed away in 1981 from illness, but some claim he broke his neck when Bettis threw him down the stairs. Soon after, his mother was put in adult protective services and removed from their house after a hospital trip for a broken hip made it evident to physicians and nurses that the woman was living with a highly abusive son. Bettis began selling marijuana and other plants to sustain himself and was arrested. He died in prison from an overdose in 1988 at 34 years old. Subsequent owners of the home have reported witnessing the glaring ghost of Bettis in the form of an animal-human hybrid.